if I may, it means that because people might hear Deipnon and go, Caleb's talking about a Roman Deipnon. That doesn't sound right. Well, what he's saying is that there's this Greek word used in the Gospels that wasn't just the ordinary word for meal.
Right.
It was a special word, and that because people they used this word, it evoked certain expectations that set it up, made it, this is different. This is different. This is like there's going to be teaching. There's going to be, some sort of larger narrative in which the meaning of the meal is embedded, right? I mean, that's what's going on here.
And meat was often served at the Deipnon. A lot of people didn't eat meat outside of the Deipnon. So ultimately, it's not like you
because it's expensive, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like you had to say this is going to be a Deipnon. But if you had a formal meal, any kind of a ceremonial meal to any god, or with any element of worship of God, which everybody there was no such thing as like an atheist back then. Everybody believed in a god. So if there was any element of the worship of your god, whoever you are hosting it, then that be considered a Deipnon. So whether you were a Jew or not, it didn't matter. It'd be like in modern American culture, if you said, "Oh, we're going to have a black tie event." Well, we know what a black tie event is, right? It means that you're going to dress up. There's expectations of what black tie is. Probably kids are not invited. There's probably going to be some speeches. And it doesn't mean that I'm celebrating some pagan ritual. It means
but it's formal.
It's formal.
It's formal.
And I know exactly what you're talking about. And
it's used twice in Revelation 19. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb.
Exactly.
That's the word for supper. And then in 19:17, it says, I saw the angel standing in the sun, cried out with a loud voice, saying to all the birds which fly in mid-heaven, come assemble for the great supper of God. And then that's like, so that you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of commanders, flesh of mighty men. So that's different than the marriage feast, of course. But in both cases, these are like major meals,
right? Where
there's invitations, where there's call out, come, there's preparations. And yeah. All right. I'm interjecting a lot here.
No. You're doing great. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So all of this to say, now let's go back to Michael's question. He says, John 6. Now remember, we're talking about the Passover. And basically, the Last Supper is not the only Deipnon. Basically, anytime the Jews get together to have a Passover meal, it's a Deipnon, essentially, okay? So when we see the breaking of bread, hang on just a sec. When we see the breaking of bread and we see the drinking of wine, first of all, the breaking of bread can be said over the entire meal, but it's represented in the bread. So this represents
lechem, right? Yeah. Lechem, right.
And this represents the banquet portion of the meal. When we see a second cup drank, so we see in Luke there's two cups. There's one before the meal and there's one after the meal. That second cup separates the eating portion of the meal from the second portion of the meal. It's ceremonial in nature. It is the ceremonial aspects of this meal. Whether or not you want to call those Jewish or whether or not you want to call them Greek or Roman or whatever, that represents the ceremonial aspects of this meal. So in my opinion, when Yeshua comes and he says, and he breaks the bread and he has the cup and he says, do this in remembrance of me. And he gives bread out. And then after the meal, he drinks the cup and he says, in the same manner, do this in remembrance of me. Okay. Now he only says that once, but not the point. Okay. What's he doing? I think that he's saying, do the entire meal, ceremonial and the physical eating in remembrance of me. Now that included a sacrifice. So that should blow everyone's mind, because anyone who tells you that Jesus didn't require sacrifice to himself, no, he does. Right when he says, do this in remembrance of me. That's requiring sacrifice to Yeshua. And the reason why is because in the Exodus, it says, and this shall be a memorial for you. In other words, you're supposed to do the Passover as a memorial. You're supposed to do it in remembrance
unto Yod He Vav
unto
He.
Yod He Vav He. And so when Yeshua says, do this in remembrance of me, he's talking about the Passover.
Caleb,
And
you got to publish that.
I know. Anyway, the point is that he preempts it. In John 6, when he says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, he's talking about the sacrifice of the Passover. And ultimately, what is the representation of the sacrifice? It's all of that. It's the ceremonial aspects of the Passover, and it's also the meal aspect of the Passover, which is eating the lamb. The lamb is what gives you the freedom from slavery to sin. The blood is ultimately, it's the life of Christ in you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Tell us your thoughts on this subject by leaving a comment in the comment section. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, and enable those notifications. And we'll see you in the next video.